We've taken everything we know and we've distilled it down into these little tiny chunks of performance or achievement that we know are not even going to motivate kids to even want to be there anymore. So we've taken all of that intrinsic motivation that was built into the program because it was exciting and fun, and kids got to talk to each other and they got to learn and they got to try new things, and we've taken all that away.
If I look at going all over the state, we did the best implementation I've seen of a 3-tier intervention.
Absolutely.
So we actually did what they said to do, but at what cost? And what did we let go of?
That's the thing. It shouldn't be either or. We should have been able to give those kids that reading instruction and give everybody this phenomenally rich, creative environment. And when people say money doesn't solve the problem, bullshit. You give me a school full of phenomenal teachers and amazing leadership and a shitload of money, and we are going to, I do believe we could solve that problem.
Don't you think on some level, I mean, we all sold out, that we knew, and I really feel like I own this, that we knew what was right for kids, and we were told, now you have to do this, and we went, I went, okay, you're telling me what to do.
I have great remorse about decisions that were made. I don't feel that it was selling out. I feel like I was duped. I think maybe I was more trusting of what might be coming down from a larger level. And so, when we started to make the changes at Chipman that started to dismantle anything that was good and beautiful and taught children how to think and learn and be independent, that they knew what it was that we needed to do. It was, I had faith that they knew something that we didn't know.
The frightening thing is the wrong people are making decisions for education. I don't want governors. I don't want senators. I don't want business people. The people who should be talking about education are teachers.
We know what to do. The educators, the scientists, the researchers, the ones who have studied the brain and how kids learn, the ones who have studied behaviors, we all know what to do. The politicians get to make the call, and they don't pay any attention to what we know.
There are a certain segment of people who gain positions of power are making war on the youth of this country. This group of privileged adults, that's who's writing policy that is causing chaos and further traumatizing kids and their families. Because they don't know how school works.
So now the people thought, oh, wait a minute, there's lots of money here.
The movement for corporate education reform has really taken off in the last 10 years or so. And there's several different facets to it. Probably the strongest entity advancing it is the Gates Foundation, simply because they have invested the most in this area and they have the most.
I mean, Bill Gates? The man never went to a public school, never taught a day in his life, never doesn't send his kids to public school, and only gives money to influence policy. Almost all of it negative.
The Gates Foundation has spent hundreds of millions of dollars promoting a very specific agenda around education reform.
And so much of American education policy is run by folks like the Gates Foundation and the Broad Foundation and the Walton Foundation.
These philanthropists, they have their pet projects. Now, Bill Gates is the big name in pushing Common Core. Got the Walton family, they're big into charters and vouchers and school choice. So they direct a lot of their money there. You've got the Broad Foundation, really big into Teach for America. And so they direct a lot of their money there. So these different philanthropists, they must be bored, and they just figure that American education is a nice place to go out and kick around the dirt a little bit.
This group that is now called the Reform Movement I think their goal is to privatize public education. It means that the schools are run by private boards. They're run by corporations. They're chain schools, just like chain stores.
A lot of people began to realize that they could take off with a privatization movement if they continued the attack on public schools that started 30 years ago with A Nation at Risk.
The report states bluntly that the very future of our nation is at risk, sabotaged by a rising tide of mediocrity in our children's education.
Then Joel Klein and Condoleezza Rice came out with a report saying we're losing the race now to China and Brazil and India. Again, it's absolute nonsense. These people want to find an enemy, make us look bad, and then privatize the schools. That's always the solution. Scare the American people and figure out how much money you can pull out of them. And that's what we're seeing in America right now.
Here's the problem. Business leaders have a theory of change based on their experience in business. They believe in free markets. They see public education as a monopoly. So they assume that if they create market-based competition with charter schools, then voila, we will get better schools. Problem is, it doesn't work that way.
When Katrina hit, lots of people left. They came back in. The public schools were gone. They were gone. They have privatized and voucherized and charterized everything in New Orleans. There's hardly any public schools there.
Privatizers wanted to take over New Orleans. I mean, that's the bottom line. When Katrina hit, that was their real opportunity. Naomi Klein writes about the shock doctrine, how the best time to effect reform is to sweep in when there's a disaster of some sort and just take over, and that's exactly what happened.
The idea of the Recovery School District was that you would take over the school, in a few years you would turn it around and hand it back to the school district, which was a great idea. That's never happened. Not one has been turned back. They all get chartered.
After Hurricane Katrina, our public school system changed drastically. We were no longer entitled to neighborhood schools. We were told that there was this thing called school choice. You could choose any school, but it wasn't really choice. You had the option of choosing any school, but you may not actually get your choice. Most of the schools became charter schools, so that's not really much of a choice if you don't want to choose a charter school.
The charter movement, which started, I think, with very high aspirations, and there were some good charters, but increasingly it's been taken over by aggressive and entrepreneurial charter entrepreneurs who see privatization as some kind of a solution.
And one of the problems with the charter school expansion is that the people that wrote the laws have sought to encourage the charter expansion by building in advantages to people who want to do real estate deals. And there's very little oversight for this sort of thing because they insist that they're private entities. You know, 10 years ago, charter schools were looked at as sort of these, you know, little hothouses of innovation, but the charter schools have sort of taken on a different character now, where they're really displacing neighborhood schools, and yet they're not accepting all of the students.
Now, reformers are quick to say, you know, you just don't want to admit the schools are failing, these schools have problems. Well, sure, schools do have problems. They serve the general public, which is a really amazing accomplishment. We take everyone.
In some cases with charter schools is they cream off the students that are the least expensive to educate. And so we call that cream skimming, because if you're taking the kids that have the better test scores, that are not special ed, that are not ELLs, and you do or do not designate them as gifted and talented, that's essentially cream skimming.
We're getting to the point where significant amounts of money are transferred from the public schools into the charter schools. And when the students leave, they take their funding with them. And if the ones that stay behind are the ones that are the most expensive to educate, so you end up creating a whole tracked education system.
Don't buy into this because it's all smoke and mirrors. There's no miracle here.